Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Rhye album, Woman. Rhye is a pop music duo who is responsible for a few of my favorite singles of 2012, and this is their debut full-length LP. The two singles that dropped before this LP, Open and The Fall, the songs that I love on this album that I heard before this album, it seems Rhye is pretty quick to place these songs right at the beginning of this new album and just follow it up with all this new material, which I suppose sort of makes sense since these songs were the inception of Rhye in a sense. But before these two songs existed, Rhye's two members were involved in other projects. First, Mike Milosh, whose name I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, is an electronic music producer. He hails from Toronto. He has a few albums under his belt, who has an incredibly feminine voice. And Robin is a singer and producer, and they were both relatively under the radar until they came together with this project, and songs like Open were getting a whole ton of buzz on the internet. But what was interesting is they kind of put the name of the project and just the name Rhye first before themselves. And make no mistake, Rhye has caught on because of the power of the songs that dropped before this full-length album, but still, it definitely goes to show kind of the power of a fresh face. Musical elements of previous projects from Mike and Robin show up on this LP through electronic music, soul music, pop music as well, but on here, you're getting a much more refined take on these styles. It's much more sophisticated. There are moments that are very, very Baroque, touched gently and lovingly with strings and horns. There are moments where I'm hearing some jazzy woodwinds as well. There are moments where it kind of reminds me of Jessie Ware a little bit, or has a bit of that throwback flavor of the latest Destroyer full length, and sort of gender bends in the way that Perfume Genius or Antony and the Johnsons sometimes do. However, in comparison to those two artists, I will say that Rhye is way more subtle, way more soft, just much more smooth and pleasant on the ears. Silky. It's buttery. It's like fresh ice cream. There is a certain kind of sexiness that Rhye tries to push forward on nearly every track here. It's a youthful sexiness that is simultaneously unsure of itself, at times feeling a little shy, especially from the vocals. It's basically the dorm room lovemaking soundtrack that will be pumped through many a laptop speaker for the duration of this year. Rhye is really good at conjuring sexy sensations, but there are times when I feel like maybe they don't bring too much to the table other than that, because when it comes to subject matter and sound and songwriting, this LP can get a little samey. And it's not necessarily because I feel like there's no talent here in this project. I feel like there's an incredible amount of potential. I just think that Rhye can get a little lax here and there on some of the songs because maybe the sensuality that they want to convey to their listeners comes so easily. There are some tracks where I sense some real ambition coming from this project, like on the opening of the track Open, which ascends the album so high into the sky with horns and strings. It's a beautiful introduction. It's inspiring, much more inspiring than some of the slightly lethargic dance grooves to come afterwards. And the song The Fall, which I definitely think could have gotten away, because it is such a good song, could have gotten away with just putting the bass groove, the drums, and the piano out there and sticking with that. Instead, Rhye covers this song very sweetly, wrapping it like a ribbon with strings and horns that pop up so subtly throughout the track. It's beautiful. Now, honestly, these two tracks that start the album off are really as awesome as the album gets when it comes to this particular vibe. I feel like there are a lot of songs that come afterwards that try to continue the same theme but to varying degrees of success. Like the song Last Dance, which comes right after. The song has all of the synthesizer horns. I think they're synthesizer horns. They sound like it. And in comparison to some of the horns that come on the previous tracks, they feel so measly. And when I hear Barrel's voice on this track and others is interestingly androgynous. You know, it definitely has a personality, it has a sound, and he is an able singer. I mean, he has no issue with pitch or anything like that. His voice is pleasant, but it's very rare that he actually pulls emotion from a place that feels really fiery or passionate. The moment where you hear him sing, "Make love to me," That's like really about the fieriest he gets on the whole LP. Some of his vocalizations at the end of the track Shed for Blood, which has this abrupt ending to it that I didn't really care for, are nice, but as some of the tracks on this LP get a little simpler, get a little more stripped back instrumentally, they're not as decked out in strings and horns, Rhye doesn't really fill in the gaps with any incredibly moving vocal performances. He seems to be just as quiet, sort of coloring things lightly, just as if he were a piece of instrumentation in the background. This doesn't lead to any terrible tracks on the LP, but it just makes many of the songs here kind of agreeable, breezy, in one ear and out the other. The only song that I really disliked was 3 Days, which had this synth groove to it. Just not interesting enough to be replayed and replayed in the way that it was. It had a bit of blue-eyed soul to it, a bit of disco to it, the track, I mean. I actually prefer the beauty and the spaciousness of the song One of Those Summer Days, which heads away from the dance grooves. It's just these lone guitar chords with just a little bit of synths dancing around in the background subtly, and in comparison to some of the more sleek and sensual songs, it's much sadder, much more just pretty. On a track with this emotion, our very shy vocals go over so much better. And my other favorite track on this LP has got to be the closer, the title track, which has these awesome progressive synth arpeggios all over the place. It's like as inspiring as the opening track. Again, it feels like I'm ascending, but this time up into space. The horns are stellar on this track too. It's a really wondrous ending. It has the inspiring wonder that I wish was a little bit more consistent throughout this LP, because I feel like I get hit in the beginning and I get hit again in the end, and the whole trip in the middle is just not that memorable. There is a lot of potential here. This album is produced really well, the singing is good, the grooves are there, but sometimes the songwriting and the vocal performances can be a little underwhelming. I feel like Rhye wants to appeal constantly to this very vague sense of steaminess. It's like they want to get sexy without getting hot. I'm really kind of feeling a light to decent 6 on this thing. If you've given it a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Rhye, woman, forever.